The sky above the planet Ralos was red and full of smoke. Fire burned across the green fields. Great cities, once full of music and peace, were now nothing but ashes. The Ralorians, a kind and peaceful alien race, had never known war. They believed in farming, building, and singing songs of harmony. But now all of that was ending. Their attackers were the Zorak, cold-blooded, armored beasts with no hearts. They came from a dark part of the galaxy, crushing every world in their path. They did not want gold. They did not want land. They wanted control and destruction. The Ralorian Council, full of old leaders, sat in silence. Their faces were full of fear. They had only one choice left. Send the message, one of them said quietly. We must ask the stars for help. Even if no one answers, we must try. A young Ralorian technician nodded and pressed a button on the console. A small device began to glow. It sent a signal through space, a signal full of pain and fear. It was a cry for help. The message said, "To anyone listening, we are the people of Ralos. We do not have weapons, we do not want war, we only want peace. Please, show us mercy." Then the message repeated again and again, moving through the black space like a ghost. Hours passed, then days. No answer. The Zorak continued to burn the world, and far, far away, the message was heard. High above a different world, on a human battleship named Iron Will, the message played on a dark screen. Commander Reed sat alone in the command room. He was an older man with silver hair and sharp eyes. He had seen many wars, but this message made his face change. He listened closely. The voice of the Ralorian was soft, tired, full of fear. "Please, show us mercy." Commander Reed stood up slowly. He walked to the center of the room and pressed the intercom button. "All units, prepare for deployment," he said firmly. "War Protocol 7, full Valkyrie strike." Around the ship, alarms began to ring. Lights turned red. Pilots ran to their launch bays. Giant machines came to life. The humans weren't just sending help, they were sending the Valkyries. The Valkyries were not ordinary ships. They were black, silent, and shaped like birds with burning wings. Each one carried weapons strong enough to destroy a city. They were fast, they were deadly, and they followed no emotion. They did not show mercy. Back on Ralos, the Ralorians began to lose hope. The Zorak reached their capital city. Mothers held their children close. Elders closed their eyes and whispered final prayers. Suddenly, the sky changed. A deep hum filled the air. The clouds began to twist and burn. A black line appeared in the sky, then another, then 100. The Valkyries had arrived. The Ralorians looked up in shock. They had never seen such machines. They were beautiful and terrifying. The Zorak laughed, at first. "More toys for us to break," their leader growled. But then, in just 10 seconds, the first Valkyrie moved. It sliced through the air like a blade. And the Zorak army was gone. From orbit, Commander Reed watched everything. He spoke into the comms calmly. "Target confirmed. Execute total response." One by one, the Valkyries opened fire. Silent beams of white light fell like rain. Zorak tanks melted. Fortresses exploded. The sky turned white. The Ralorians stood frozen. They had asked for mercy. But what came from the stars was death on metal wings. The sky was still trembling after the arrival of the strange black shapes. They moved silently like giant birds with shining wings. The people of Ralos watched with wide eyes and pounding hearts. What were these machines? Were they here to help or something else? Commander Reed's voice came through the communication lines, calm but firm. "Valkyrie Squadron, prepare to begin operation." The pilots, hidden deep inside their ships, waited for the signal. Their machines were not like anything the Ralorians had seen before. They moved smoothly, like shadows, flying through the air. The first Valkyrie soared low over the battlefield. It glided over fields where the Zorak had made their camps. Without a sound, beams of pure energy shone from its wings. Wherever the light touched, the enemy's defenses vanished. The Zorak soldiers looked up in surprise, confused by this new threat. The Relorians held their breath. Could these machines really protect them? The Valkyries moved with perfect precision, as if they could think for themselves. They surrounded the enemy, cutting off every escape path. The Zorak tried to regroup, but the machines were always one step ahead. The humans had brought not just power but intelligence, an unstoppable force working as one. From the ground, the Relorians whispered among themselves. They came on wings of metal, silent and strong. A young Relorian woman named Lyra watched, closely. Her family's home had been destroyed, but now there was hope in her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she dared to believe they might survive. In space above, the human fleet was not finished yet. More ships arrived, shining like stars, against the black void. Commander Reed gave another order. Prepare the next phase. The Valkyries changed their formation, now moving faster and closer to the Zorak's main forces. The battle was not loud with explosions or shouts. It was quiet, sharp, and clean. The machines did their work without hesitation. The Zorak were pushed back step by step, but the fight was far from over. Suddenly a shadow crossed the horizon. A giant ship appeared. It was unlike anything anyone had seen, bigger than a mountain covered in dark plates that seemed to absorb the light. The Zorak's secret weapon had arrived. The Relorians gasped. They had heard stories of this ship, but never believed it was real. Commander Reed studied the massive ship through his screen. "This will be our greatest challenge," he said quietly. "But we cannot fail. For the Relorians, for all who face cruelty in the galaxy." As the giant ship moved closer, the Valkyries formed a protective shield around the Relorian cities. Lyra's heart raced. She could see the machines moving like guardians, standing firm against the dark shadow. The sky grew darker with the approach of the giant ship. Everyone waited, holding their breath. The next moment would change everything. The giant ship above, Ralos, hovered like a dark cloud blocking out the sun. It was massive, its surface covered with strange symbols and shifting panels. A heavy silence spread across the land, as if the whole planet was holding its breath. Inside the human command ship, Commander Reed stood still, watching the shadow grow larger on his screen. His officers looked to him, waiting for his next move. But Reed wasn't afraid. He had faced great dangers before. What stood out to him now was not the size of the enemy, but what it meant. "This is not just a battle," he said softly. "This is a message." Down on the surface, the Relorians gathered in the ruins of their city, looking to the skies. The Valkyries, now floating quietly in formation, shimmered in the red light. They did not move. They did not speak. But the people felt safer just seeing them there. Lyra stood among the crowd. She looked up, holding her younger brother's hand. His small fingers trembled. "Do you think they'll protect us?" he asked in a whisper. Lyra didn't answer right away. She looked at the human machines and saw something strange. Purpose. Maybe even honor. "Yes," she said at last. They didn't come this far just to stop now. The giant ship began to open. A glow appeared from its center. Strange shapes moved inside it. Machines, crafts, something else entirely. The air buzzed with energy. The Zorak had brought their strongest force, but the humans had come prepared. From the command ship above, Commander Reed gave a signal. A new ship detached from the human fleet. It moved slowly, almost silently. Its size was not as great as the enemy's, but its presence was stronger. It was called Judgment, and it was unlike anything Ralos had ever seen. The people on the ground looked up again. This new ship was shaped like a great tower, its surface covered in glowing blue lights. It moved with calm grace, floating straight, toward the heart of the enemy formation. A quiet hum spread across the sky. The two ships faced each other now, one dark and full of shadows, the other glowing with soft light and power. The space between them felt like a thin thread ready to snap. Inside the Judgment, the human AI system came online. It was calm, intelligent, and deeply focused. Its task was clear: protect the innocent, stop the threat, and bring balance. The first move came not from weapons but from information. The human ship sent a coded message directly into the enemy systems. Words appeared across screens in the Zorak mothership. Turn back. You have already lost. The Zorak did not respond. Instead, their ship released a wave of smaller crafts, fast, strange, and full of unknown technology. They raced toward the human ship like insects swarming a light. The Valkyries responded. One by one, they rose into the sky again. Their wings lit up, and they moved with perfect timing. A dance began between the dark ships and the silver birds. Quiet, sharp, and full of meaning. On the ground, the Relorians watched the skies glow. It looked like stars falling upward. It was beautiful and frightening all at once. Lyra's brother pointed. "Look!" he shouted. "They're pushing them back." She nodded, eyes wide. "They're not just machines," she whispered. "There's something more." Commander Reed watched the battle unfold. He knew the enemy would not give up easily. But he also knew one thing: when humanity decided to protect someone, they never stopped halfway. He pressed a final button. A new signal was sent. The Judgment ship began to change. Its shape unfolded, like a flower in bloom. Large panels shifted, glowing brighter, forming a giant shield across the front of the human fleet. It wasn't a weapon. It was a promise. A promise that they would not let the light go out on this planet. The skies above Ralos were no longer empty. They were alive, with motion, light, and silent strength. The human ship Judgment, now fully revealed, floated between the stars and the planet like a guardian. Its shield glowed with soft shifting light, wide enough to protect not just the human fleet but the Relorian cities below. The enemy crafts continued their advance. They moved quickly, surrounding the human formation like a net closing in. Yet no panic came from the human side. Everything moved with calm coordination like a puzzle fitting into place. Down on the surface, the Relorians gathered in silence. Even children who once cried in fear stood still now. No one spoke. They could all feel it. Something had shifted. Something greater was happening. Lyra stood beside her brother on a high hill just outside the city ruins. The stars were still, hidden behind the floating warships. "Why are they not afraid?" her brother asked. "Why don't they run like we did?" She looked up, eyes reflecting the glow of the human machines. "Because they didn't come to run," she said softly. "They came to end this." Inside the human command ship, quiet voices moved between officers and crew. There was no shouting, no fear. They had seen moments like this before. Dark skies, unknown dangers. But this time felt different. Commander Reed stood before a giant screen showing the enemy formation. His hand moved across a glowing surface, bringing up new data, new strategies. Then, something unexpected appeared. A signal. It came from within the giant enemy ship. It wasn't clear, it wasn't a voice, but it was something, a pattern, a wave, a rhythm. Strange, almost musical. "Is it a message?" one officer asked. Reed narrowed his eyes. "No, it's a request." Everyone in the room paused. "What kind of request?" asked the communications tech. Reed stared at the screen a moment longer before answering. "They're not asking for help. They're asking to be understood." Back on Ralos, the Valkyries had stopped moving. They now hovered, above the capital city in perfect stillness. The glowing shield from Judgment shimmered gently around them. It was peaceful, like a calm before a sunrise. Suddenly, the dark enemy ship began to shift. It rotated slowly, its panels changing color, showing patterns no one had seen before. Not red or black, but now soft blue lines, like light reflecting on water. The Relorians gasped. Some dropped to their knees, Others held each other, unsure whether this was hope or something else. In space, a private channel opened. A face appeared on the human command screen. It was Zorak, but different. No anger, no threats. The face looked old, worn, tired. Its eyes blinked slowly as if carrying the weight of many years. "Why?" it asked. The voice was deep, slow, unsure. Commander Reed took a step forward. "Why what?" he replied calmly. The face on the screen blinked again. "Why protect them? Why stand in our path?" Reed didn't answer right away. He looked around at his crew, at the silent stars beyond the window. Then he spoke. "Because they asked for peace. And we remember what it was like to ask and hear nothing." The Zorak leader stared for a long time. No words came, but the screen didn't turn off. Something had changed. Back on the ground, the Relorians looked up and saw the enemy ships slowing, pulling back just a little. Not gone, not finished, but hesitating. Lyra felt a tear roll down her cheek. "They listened," she whispered. Her brother looked up. "Is it over?" She held his hand tight. "Not yet, but for the first time, they're thinking." Above, in the stars, between two great powers, there was no fire, no blast, just silence. And in that silence, a question waited to be answered. The stars above Ralos blinked gently, as if watching the fragile moment unfolding between two great forces. The silence between the ships wasn't empty. It was filled with thought, caution, and a question still hanging in space. The giant Zorak vessel hovered in place, its dark frame lit now by soft blue lights that hadn't been seen before. The aggressive shapes it once carried were slowly retracting. The smaller enemy ships no longer swarmed. They paused mid-flight, uncertain. Something had begun to shift. Inside, the human command ship Judgment, Commander Reed stood motionless, watching the quiet dance in the sky. The face of the Zorak leader remained on the screen, still thoughtful, no longer demanding. "You don't have to walk this path alone," Reed said gently, his voice calm and clear. "There are better ways." For a few moments, the only reply was a deep, steady breath. Then came the words. "You are strange. For protectors," the Zorak leader said, as if the idea itself was hard to understand. "You did not use fear. You did not answer pain with pain." Reed's expression did not change. Because protection isn't about power, it's about choice. And we choose to stand beside those who can't stand alone. The signal faded slowly. No warning, no threat. Just a quiet goodbye. Then the Zorak ship began to move. Not toward the humans, but away. It was not retreat. It was respect. Down on Ralos, the night was peaceful for the first time in weeks. The HFY Valkyries still floated above the cities, unmoving like silent statues. Their silver wings caught the moonlight and shimmered softly. Lyra sat near the hill's edge with her younger brother. They had returned to the edge of the old village, where broken stones still told the story of what had been lost. But now, something new was beginning. A group of human officers had landed quietly nearby. They didn't speak loudly. They didn't act like heroes. They helped the injured, shared supplies, and fixed what they could. People began to step out of hiding, watching them, unsure, but hopeful. A Relorian elder approached one of the officers and asked a simple question. "Why?" "You don't know us." The officer smiled gently. "We didn't have to know you, we only had to hear you." Above them, the human fleet began its slow drift back into the sky. Their mission was nearly done. The world below had found its voice. Again, Commander Reed gave one final order. "Leave them with more than just protection, leave them with a future." Teams on the ground began planting small towers. Technology meant to heal the land, restore energy, and build new homes from what had been destroyed. It wasn't a gift. It was a beginning. Lyra stood quietly near one of the machines, watching it glow. Her brother laughed beside her, seeing the colors rise into the air. A human officer approached them, handing the boy a small glowing stone. "What is it?" Lyra asked. "A beacon," the officer said. "If you ever need us again, light it and we will come." She nodded, holding the stone tightly. But deep inside, she hoped she'd never need to use it again, because now Ralos was changing. Not because of fear, but because someone had chosen to listen. Far above, in the stars, the Valkyries turned, slowly. Their wings folded in. Their work was not to conquer. It was to remind the galaxy that mercy, when truly answered, could reshape everything. The stars were peaceful once more. Above the quiet lands of Ralos, the silver Valkyries moved into formation one last time. Their wings no longer glowed with tension. Instead, they shimmered like starlight, soft, calm, and proud. On the surface, the people of Ralos had begun to rebuild. Crumbled homes were being cleared. New buildings, powered by human technology, slowly rose from the ground. The fields were healing. For the first time in a long while, laughter echoed through the valleys. Children ran through the open paths again. Water flowed from newly built fountains. The fear that once gripped every corner had begun to fade like a bad dream at sunrise. But even in peace, questions remained. What had truly changed the Zorak's decision? Why had the Valkyries stopped them without force? And most of all, would the peace last? Lyra walked through the central square with her little brother. He no longer clung to her hand. He ran ahead now, chasing light patterns from one of the human repair drones. She smiled gently. His innocence had returned. That alone was a victory. At the edge of the square, a crowd had gathered. A human envoy had arrived, tall, calm, and dressed in soft blue armor. No weapons, no guards, just words and an open hand. One of the Ralorian leaders stepped forward and asked what many had been wondering. "Will you stay?" The human envoy looked toward the stars, then back at the people. "We don't stay," he replied. "We answer. When a voice calls out, we listen. When fear spreads, we bring hope. And when the helpless rise again, we step back, because that's when we know you're ready." A quiet hum filled the air as the Valkyries began to rise higher, into the sky. The people watched with a mixture of awe and sorrow. They had become symbols of safety, of strength wrapped in silence. Lyra felt her chest tighten. A strange sadness filled her heart. But then she looked around. The smiling faces, the open windows, the food stalls returning. The Valkyries weren't leaving them alone. They were leaving them free. Back aboard the Judgment, Commander Reed stood in the observation room, watching the planet grow smaller below. His hands were behind his back, his mind deep in thought. An officer stepped in quietly. "The Zorak have withdrawn completely. Their last message came through just now." Reed turned slightly. "What did it say?" The officer smiled faintly. "It said, 'We saw something we did not understand. Now, we wish to learn.'" Reed nodded. "Then we've done our job." As the ship began to shift course, heading toward the next point in deep space, Reed spoke one final time. "Prepare the next mission. Somewhere out there, someone else is calling." Back on Ralos, as the last Valkyrie disappeared into the morning sky, a breeze passed through the rebuilt city. Wind chimes rang softly. Flowers opened. A new day had begun. Lyra looked up, hand resting on the small, glowing beacon the humans had left behind. She didn't feel fear anymore. She felt strength, not the kind that crushes, the kind that lifts, the kind that remembers, the kind that answers. Because when humanity comes not to rule but to rise beside you, hope flies not on wings of war but on wings of promise, and that promise now belonged to Ralos, forever.